It's hard to hear that, but yeah. So to be able to articulate that, and then just know the process that I think young people are going to go through with doubts.
That's helpful. So why do young people in particular need training in apologetics?
Well, I would say, the world is trying to discipling them right now. School, media, and that's a whole different thing to go down. That the media, the arts disciple not through logic but through emotion. But I think, one study found that 40% of young people growing up in a Christian home had their first doubts in junior high, and another 45% had their first doubts in high school.
Wow.
And so I think, to me, and again, I talk about this in the Disciple Making Parent, Paul says to Timothy, continue in what you've learned and become convinced of. And so to me, at least in my life, and often I'll ask adult Christians who grew up in a Christian home, I'll say, is there a time your faith became your own? And they will, are at 90 to 95% will say yes. And there'll be something either in their late teen years, early 20s, something where they would say they went from their parents' faith, a childlike faith, to an adult faith. And so to me, part of the apologetic training is expecting that doubt. So we're not freaked out when their bodies change, We're like, that's part of growing up. And so in a similar way, expecting that, hey, not only they're going to have some questions, even if they aren't asking them. And I think that's the challenge and the busyness of sports and different activities. I know I didn't ask my questions. They were just gnawing at me. So to me, part of it is, again, like I said before, being able to speak to themselves. Yes, this is really true. And then, of course, speak if they're, with their peers in school, to be able to speak to them as well, and to have, good answers, that focus on Jesus. So I think that young people need more so. Too often we're teaching them what to believe and not why to believe faith.
Yeah.
And that's so to me, yes, absolutely.
That's good. I think that is so valuable. And I think churches need to engage in that kind of preparing of young people for the defending their belief, for understanding why they believe, like you mentioned. I even think of, with what you mentioned, you talked about doubts in junior high. My brother-in-law, part of his conversion experience was he was having major doubts about God's existence all the way back to elementary school, to late elementary school. And he thinks a huge part of him coming to Christ very clearly was when he saw that the people in his church were ready and happy to help him with these doubts and these questions, rather than to shun him or think him as being somehow wicked or anything because of these doubts. So I think it was really helpful for him coming to know the Lord, even in elementary school age. And now,
I had a friend who had kind of the opposite experience, and the youth pastor told him, the problem with you is just the meat between your ears. You just need to stop thinking and, just sort of accept it. And, well, he went to an Ivy League school and found people who had answers that were different, and, you can see how that went.
Yeah. That's a shame. What happens when we don't prepare our young people with the defense for the faith? Ben gave one example, but Chap, what do you think?
Well, I think, if nobody ever told you your baby teeth were going to fall out, that would freak you out. If nobody ever told you about, adolescence, it would freak you out. So I think to prepare them in a very low key way, is the best thing. It's interesting if you look at scripture, and again, I talk about this in the Disciple Making Parent, but Jesus, think about how shocking the crucifixion was for the disciples. They they're going to watch their leader, who they thought was going to usher in the physical kingdom. He's going to be shamefully killed, tortured and killed in front of them. And they're just going to say, well, that was a waste. And what in the world were we doing? And instead, he actually, if you can see throughout throughout the Gospels, he's actually preparing them. And he's saying, this is going to happen. They didn't really understand what was going on, but it actually built their faith, that they were prepared, that they were inoculated. And so you see Solomon in Proverbs 5-8, he's preparing his son, for sexual temptation. And we as the adults are supposed to be the wise ones. And so we're supposed to be able to look forward and say, this is what's coming, and this is what may come. And when it comes, don't be, you may have some doubts. That's okay. There are answers. I may not know what the answers are, but we're going to find the answers out there. And that's, Ben, unfortunately, that's what your friend did not have. But I think to be able to say, yeah, let's go find some very, 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 very smart people and see what they've written, and I by God's grace, I was privileged, to attend an Ivy League school as well. And, I can tell you that it took a while, but I realized, what? There are smart people on both sides of this issue. This is not an issue of Christians are not smart. The atheists and the agnostics are. So yeah, when we don't prepare, I think it's gonna freak them out, or they're gonna suffer in silence. I would say, kind of like I did, which is just it was like a low level fever. It just bothered me, but I never really asked anyone.
That's I've heard Don Carson talk about when he was doing his doctoral research at Cambridge. So he was studying the New Testament at the highest level, and his doctoral supervisor, I think, had been, I guess you'd consider him evangelical, and then at this point he was very skeptical. He believed in the Lord and things like. He was skeptical about the truthfulness of the New Testament documents. And anyway, Carson asked him to just relay how you got to where you are, not to defend it, but just how did you get there? And he said, he realized even this guy, as intelligent as he was, he didn't have it all figured out. He didn't have a great deal of confidence in that, and then how it spilled out into his life. And he said, I'm much more content with, I know the Lord and the confidence I have in that, and it's okay. I don't have to have know every single thing there is to know about this. And like you said, there's people on both sides of the issue who are thinking about it, and but it's not that the quote intellectuals have it all pieced together as well. So how do you? What are some unhelpful ways that you think that churches might approach defending the faith with young people?
Well, I think you've already covered that in terms of just don't ask that question. There does come a point where it is moral, not mental. But I would say that's after lots and lots of conversations. Where you say, yeah, let me go get you the stack of books, and let's see that there are people out there. One of the smart people out there. One of the interesting things as I've observed, is people who come to Christ as adults often combine the out of Timothy, the learning and the convinced. So they don't need to be convinced, because they just know Jesus changed my life. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes if those people can be in church leadership, it's hard to identify with a young person who's grown up, and this is the only life he or she has known. And so to think, wow, they're wrestling with some questions. And so I think just the short answer is just to squash those rather than to invite those, and to say, yeah, let's talk about them. So that's probably the biggest way. And then I think probably if you just go, well, it's just easy, it's black and white. Here's the three answers to this question. demonizing non-Christians.
Yes.
Just say, yeah, they're stupid, or to skewer their motives. Now, I would say, yes, there are false teachers, and that needs to be pointed out. But at the same time, I also I need to treat them in the image of God and go after their ideas, and to show that their ideas are not are not helpful. Here's what they're hiding. Here's the assumptions. Tim Keller has a great thing where he talks about everybody's got faith. So the atheist has to have faith in this. The Christian has to have faith in this. And so no matter which issue you're talking about, they're assuming they've got faith. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's some really great points. And I agree with you. There's way too much demonizing of our opponents in that. I think there's a lot of approaches to quote-unquote apologetics in churches where it's just making straw man arguments of our opposition. Even in the Christian film industry, I think a blatant example of that would be, I remember when we went to private Christian college, and a science teacher challenged an intro to science class. I don't remember what it was, but a science teacher challenged us, and I think it was our biology class. He asked how many people here believe that atheists and evolutionists think that humans are direct descendants of monkeys. That evolution means that humans are great grandchildren of monkeys. And the vast majority believe that's what evolutionists think, that we are the offspring of monkeys. And that is nowhere near an accurate representation of what Darwinian evolution actually believes. If anything, it's far more cousins than grandchildren. And I think that was an example. I mean, all of these young people grew up in churches where it was presented that atheists are the stupid people that believe that we come from monkeys. How practically does the church prepare children and youth to defend the faith?
Well, I think it starts with confidence you have. So there's preaching pastor and teachers to drop that in. There's ways if things, people are wrestling with things, to drop them in without, you would make them a sub point of the sermon without making it a whole sermon. Of course, a class, is excellent. So books or video series or that type thing. And to me, I think also whether it's parents or those who work with kids to be aware of those sort of moments that a child's asking you that a question, or a young person, and say, okay, this is really important. Think in my head, this is really important. I need to listen carefully, respond deeply, or say, I don't know, and let me go research that for you. So to me, it's a combination of leadership being confident and aware of the process, formal teaching, in the curriculum somehow, and then just conversations. But I mean, I should ask you guys that, because you're right on the front lines.
Tony, you work with youth. I mean, what do you?
I do. So one thing that we're trying to do, and this is an encouragement from a youth ministry worker that we've had for many years, that has seen some tough questions come from youth. And we decided this summer for the whole summer, we allowed youth to submit hard questions that they don't know an answer to, or that they've heard. And we encouraged parents as well to submit anything with that. And we've decided to start off our Sunday school year. We don't do Sunday school during the summer, and take the beginning of Sunday school to just come together and encourage parents to come out as well. And we're going to tackle all these big issues. We're going to tackle them really seriously, even looking to some experts in that. And that's one thing that we have tried to do in our youth ministry. We haven't done as much in our children's ministry with me as much yet. I think Sarah, our children's ministry director, has done a lot to really answer questions as they come, though.
That's good.
I want to commend you for that, because often it's the kids who are willing to ask the question